This video was originally recorded at the annual Buddhism and Psychotherapy program held at Menla Retreat and Dewa Spa in Phoenicia, New York. To learn more about this annual program, please visit menla.us.
That creates the universe in the Indian idea. So that's kind of fun. And then prajna paramita, transcendent wisdom. You know, prajna, which we consider as wisdom, nya is the same root as kno in English, gnya, gnosis, you have nya, same thing. And pra is mean intensified, so intensely know. And what intensely know means is that when you really know something, the object of knowledge and your subjectivity merge, and there's no duality. And you are the thing that you know. So that's prajna, super know, by being what you're knowing. It's like, sort of like a CAT scan, knows the condition of your body by merging with it, and reflecting that. So, and that's the mother of all Buddhas. That's the female Buddha, not male Buddha. So therefore, Blessed Lady Buddha, Bhagavati, Bhagavan or Bhagavat, Bhagavati means the one who has the luck or the fortune. And so that's that thing. And then what is interesting is this sutra is actually taught by Avalokiteshvara. And Avalokiteshvara is the God, Bodhisattva, divine Bodhisattva, who cares about the universe. Avalokita means who looks on with care. And it's actually a critique of the Hindu Vedic idea of Maha-Eshvara, the great God, the creator, kind of like the all-powerful, So this is the Avalokita, the God who cares. It's like he is a Buddha, actually, but he manifests as a Bodhisattva, and he sometimes manifests as female. He's Kuan Yin in China, or Kannon in Japan. Who can be either male or female.
Doesn't it mean she who hears she who hears our cries? Isn't that?
I'm sorry?
She who hears our cries. Isn't that one of the other?
Well, that's a sort of version of the Chinese thing. That's instead of Ishvara, it's Swara, which can be sound. So there's a lot of the Chinese stopped really getting much transmission from India around 6th, 7th century. So then they had a certain idea about it, and they didn't on Tara, the female Avalokiteshvara and so on. They don't have Tara. So therefore they have Avalokiteshvara as Kuan Yin, Kuan Shi Yin, which means who sees sees the sounds of beings crying, which has the same idea of crying, suffering, and sees the sound of their crying. And therefore is the universal compassion of all Buddhas, the idea, incarnation of compassion of all Buddhas. So, in other words, this sutra is taught by Avalokiteshvara rather than by the Buddha. The Buddha just goes into a samadhi, which in his case is more of like a sort of, creates a spacious vibe that then affects everyone in his field, which is called the illumination of the profound. That's the clear light of the void, that means. And then Avalokiteshvara has an epiphany where he sees his material and mental processes. He realizes their utter relativity, that is, that they are free of any kind of intrinsic reality of anything that would not relate to anything else. And then again, within that field, Shariputra, who's the dualistic Theravada, Hinayana, or dualistic Buddhist saint, and Buddha's foremost disciple in that field, he asked Avalokiteshvara, he's inspired to ask, well, how do you do this transcendence of wisdom thing? And he says, noble son. Notice he's a little chauvinist. And then Avalokiteshvara says, noble son or noble daughter. He makes a very big point of that. And then they go on, and tomorrow I might do some more about the sort of main meat paragraph, which is this next big long one. Realize the five, and especially the big statement here is voidness is matter, matter is voidness. Meaning that, this hard tabletop and my knuckle both are voidness, not just the atoms inside it, not just the, what?
Move it down a bit.
What?
Move it down a bit, that's all.
What are you doing? Oh, it's winking around. And so, because otherwise we think that, well, matter is some hard thing, not void, Because sort of with matter is the ultimate thing that we think is non-void, but here it is void. And my knuckle can hit the tabletop because both are empty of being an intrinsically real knuckle and an intrinsically real tabletop. They're just a relative tabletop and a relative knuckle, so therefore I can knock on them because they're empty. Therefore they can function. Emptiness enables the function. The negation of anything fixed and absolute in any relative thing makes it relationally functional, if you follow. So the that's the negation, and the that creates is same. Wisdom and compassion are same. And once you have the idea of the absolute is this relative, then what is of absolute concern is the quality of the relative, because there's no escape from it. And therefore any aspect or being in the relative is suffering, even if they're doing so by mistake. That is your absolute concern. So then that's where the wisdom becomes compassion. Compassion meaning the intolerability of anyone's suffering, which itself, again, the intolerability of their suffering only can arise from a bliss of the wise being, the bliss of the release of wisdom, where it sees that other beings' actual state is the state of bliss. That's what holds them together, is the strong force in all of their cells and everything is their bliss. And then they don't enjoy it because they think they're deprived of something. They're having separation anxiety. So that's where wisdom becomes compassion. So that's why those gurus, those holy beings, those different even mystical traditions that teach that salvation, the ultimate, is leaving town. Oh yeah, I went off to big nirvana somewhere else. They thereby cut off compassion. If you can leave and go somewhere, and then you say, well, at least I'm not around hurting anybody, not making a problem, I'm not using up the air because I'm gone. But it's actually psychosis. The idea that you're going to be blissful somewhere apart from everywhere, and that'll be everything. It's just you and I call it the cheap oneness. It's the cheapo version of oneness. Oh, I realized emptiness. The whole world was just emptiness. And, I wasn't even there, so I'm not guilty. But it was my awareness was just this vast space of emptiness. And all these people are just an illusion, and they're suffering just an illusion, and mine was an illusion. Oh, gee, now I'm back just temporarily until my momentum of my embodiment kind of wears out, and then I clunk over, and then I'm gone. And I'm all alone, all one, nobody else is there, and really, I'm not really, so it's not like I'm enjoying it without you. But that's that's ultimate isolated psychosis. And it's not absolute anyway, because the relative being entered it. Therefore, it has a doorway and a boundary, and therefore it's a relational state. So it's a delusion that it's an absolute. And it's an ultimate selfishness. And then, since nobody can stay there anyway, because there's a kind of state, feels like a form of state. And then the person's back hanging out, and then they behave selfishly. And then they make cults, and they wreck Dharma centers, and they're a pain in the neck. Give me a few Rolls Royces. I'm enlightened. Give me a break. Give us all a break. Excuse me. Okay? So the expensive oneness is, okay, it all disappears in a certain mood, in a certain concentration, it seems to all disappear. But then, it's here. So then, the here-ness and the disappear-ness ultimately merge. So that just means it disappears as a bunch of isolated, relative, absolute things, and it's here as a totally interwoven relational thing. So there's nothing to do but make it better. But somehow being aware that it's any kind of ultimacy about it is disappearing gives a kind of blissful release feeling that kind of can overwhelm all the mistaken notion of misery somehow. I mean, that's all indescribable. So therefore, we just talk about it a lot. None of what we say will capture it, actually. You can't capture the tolerance of extreme cognitive dissonance, the embodiment of extreme cognitive dissonance, of the absolute relativity. But, and the great analogy is the mirror. When you see a reflection in a mirror, it looks like there's another room over there and there's another person. We have that little Pekingese dog, that little cute one running around. He hasn't figured that out yet, and he finds a long mirror in my daughter's house, and he goes over there and he really woofs it up with that creature in there that really makes him mad. They really go for it. He hasn't quite figured out that it's himself. So that's what it looks like to us. Then the disappearance is you realize there's nothing in there. There's no other thing. It's just a reflection of this. But then you see the reflection of this, and then you really, you put on your face or shave or whatever it is you're doing in the mirror, or look in the rearview mirror in your car. You correct the left-right without another thought, the distortion. And you completely engage with it, but you know it's an illusion. It's just a mirror reflection. So that's the Buddha's way of dealing with us. He sees us as a reflection of the bliss void indivisible of reality. And therefore, he doesn't get caught up in our misperception that we're in misery. He acknowledges that we feel that with his first noble truth. But he's like the doctor who sees the health in the patient, sees the getting over it to himself or herself of the patient, and therefore is able to stay cool and sort of slowly allow the patient to discover that, help them discover that, right? So that's the analogy that we do. So that's our sutra. And gate means gone. So gate, gone, paragate, very gone, super gone, parasamgate, super totally gone. Bodhi means awakeness or enlightenment. Swaha means all hail. So that's where I got it. But the Spanish translation of my translation of that, they didn't consult me. So when I saw that, when they sent me a copy, it said, puerta, puerta, puerta grande, puerta muy grande. But they told, that's why I put the Y, so people don't think it's gate. I was very distressed. Puerta, puerta, puerta grande, puerta muy grande. But it is puerta. It's a doorway into bliss void indivisible. Still, gate. Okay, that's all. That's it from me tonight. Okay, let's go. Question Q&A, or whatever. Or you want to do something?
No.
¿Cómo te llamas?
Carla.
What is your name?
Carla.
Ana?
Carla.
What?
Carla.
Oh, Carla. Oh, qué bueno. Carla. Sebastián, no. ¿Y cómo se llama el viejo?
The red hair, Dante.
¿Cómo?
Dante.
What?
Dante.
Dante Alighieri? Yes. Oh, my. Poor guy is going around carrying a big pen on him.
It was the first
La
one.
Puerta. Okay. Yes,
My
Carla.
question is,
¿Qué quieres saber?
the more I hear you, I understand. Would it be correct, going back to your example about the nose, would it be correct to understand that the nose doesn't exist in terms of being something separated from our body? So it's a construction, right? The idea of the nose, but yet we recognize the existence of the functionality of the nose as part of the body, right? So it's not that it's empty or nothing. It's empty of their own value as separate from the body, but it still exists, right?
Right.
So why don't you call it in terms of, instead of emptiness, wholeness, the whole idea?
The what?
Why don't you call it wholeness instead of emptiness?
Wholeness, why don't you?
Yeah, why don't you?
I mean, as a principle.
Because
it was already taken, that word was taken already.
Muy buena pregunta. Very good question. Because the reason you call it emptiness to start with is because when we see the nose, we, without realizing it, like Plato, there's an ideal form of noseness that is instantiated in a particular nose for Plato. That's called the forms, And every one of the metaphysicians in the Western thought and some kinds of Eastern thought, they feel there must be something in it that's really makes it the referent of our concept knows. And because and therefore when we suffer, we feel we really suffer. And therefore when we feel we're here, we feel we're really here. And therefore when we lose our temper, then this rage that says, I'm going to get them, you know, which will carry us right into death, actually, or killing. It's so powerful. You know, it's really there. You know, we can't resist it because it's so real, you see. It's really real. We exaggerate quality of notes. So the emptiness is that what we discover, and we have to keep meditating, we have to keep analyzing, we have to keep vipassanaing and seeing through the real nose, the real ear, the real eye, the real this, the real that, the real emotion, the real anger, the real etc. And then we begin to realize it's a relational. It gets more and more like where we can question it. So that's the balm, the medicine of that helps us out of our entrapment and thinking it's really. Then when we're really old, then we're in such a misery. That nice nose we used to have, it all collapses down on the face. You know, if we drank a lot, it all turns red and it kind of it goes drooping down the face in the most horrible manner. We can rush to surgeons and have them put in a little thing, you know, and then the rest of the face will collapse, and they quickly pat that up. Then we end up looking like one of those things in the movie Brazil, like this. Because to us, that nice nose was the real nose, and this other thing is some kind of an infestation. It's a disease. It's a horror. It's horrible. We suffer. But when we relax, actually, about it, we relate to it, indeed, they even say then the nose gets more relaxed. The cells of the nose, the whole thing doesn't collapse as badly. Sometimes you see these 99-year-old yogis, and they still have like a youthful-looking nose. Then they collapse. It actually, you know, because your face is, you know, personality. You know, persona in Latin means a mask. So then I think, you know, Bob, when I was 18, I was really cool. I had both eyes. I was like, I played the trollers and trolls and crescent. I used to dance on tables with Salamanca boots, drunk as a skunk. So that was the real thing, right? And then I can't bear it changing and, you know, losing this and that because it gets stuck. So that's why the emptiness is the liberating, it's the solvent, it's the lubrication of the functionality of the relative. And then it makes the relative the absolute concern, which means it makes compassion the most important thing. Love becomes everything. Compassion and love are the same. Love is the determination that the beloved be happy. Compassion is the intolerance of the beloved's suffering. So they're just two sides of the same coin. And that becomes everything because there's no getting away. It's like, shall I tell my subway thing?
Please.
Everyone, all the Vipassanites love my subway thing. New York subway, right? You guys are New Yorkers, a lot of you. Right? You get on the subway. How do you interact with other people on the subway? Zero interaction. You have your phone. Nowadays, you used to have a newspaper with you. If you were doomed because you forgot to bring the newspaper or the latest novel, you're doomed to read the commercials. You know, and learn how you can go to a school and learn how to get a free call, whatever, in 3 languages. But now we have phones, so we can get on that, read our Kindle or like check things, and then they're putting Wi-Fi down there to keep us in the hypnosis. You know? So you have no relation with the other people in the subway, and even so, you don't look at anybody, no eye contact. If you make eye contact, you get jumpy, and then you want to make sure they don't follow you out, and then you get out that station. They want to make sure you don't follow them out, and it's like minimal connection. And right, mad scientist. Suddenly, subway car, James Bond fantasy, shunted onto a sideline, slam metal doors and things come down. You hear Henry Kissinger's voice saying, "This is natural security experiment. What is going to happen to you? You're never going to leave here. You're going to stay here forever. There is toilet there, and the food will be brought, but you cannot get out. And don't tell me you have a credit card. Will not do any good. You will be a victim of terrorism, national security experiment." I mean, I know it's a silly analogy, but then suddenly What do you do with the other people in the subway car? You're stuck with them. They're stuck with you. Suddenly, who's the friend? Somebody's freaking out. Everybody's concerned. Right? Nobody's not your family suddenly because you're locked in this space with them. Right? So people might think they'll get out, it's fake, and they'll freak out for a little while, but eventually you're there. So the Buddhist view of absolute relativity is it's endless. It's not just, there's no way, nobody gets out of here a dead. You just die and you're oh, my exes, yes, I screwed them over in that final. I got a harder lawyer than theirs, and I got everything, and they left nothing, and blah, blah, blah. No. Next lifetime, you fall in love with that ex again, and they have a better lawyer. And there's no escape from anybody. So then what? Everything, every tiny thing becomes of maximum infinite importance. That every relationship you want to optimize a little bit. It's a beautiful thing. Samadhi Raja Sutra, the king of Samadhi Sutra, says, who understands cause and effect, causality, karma, action, function, interconnection. Whoever understands cause and effect, that person will understand emptiness. Whoever understands emptiness, they become mindful, alert to the most minute details of everything. Isn't that nice? You would think from the way some of these enlightened people behave, that understanding emptiness, and you wouldn't give a damn about anything. Because just like materialists don't ultimately really give a damn, that's why they are overheating this planet. Because they think just I die and I'm out of here, like the French king. Après moi la déluge. Right? But if you're here forever, with everyone, you cannot leave anybody out. You cannot leave anybody your enemy. You cannot be content with anybody's misery because it's going to come back to you. You won't dish out any misery. You're just going to be the node, the nexus of trying to just change every kind of thing into something. Sometimes it can only be a little tiny bit better. And the example I always like to use, Shantideva, the great Shantideva, he says, and this is sort of in the level of ethics and human interaction, he says, in all my lives, if anybody ever asks me for any directions, like where's the bathroom, like where's the conference center, like where's Menla, I will never point where to go to them with one finger like this. I will never do that. Because when you do that, you're like a boss, they don't, you're like pulling some kind of superiority over them, I'm going to go over there, I know. No, I will take my whole hand like a host inviting an honored guest to go where they want to go. And I will invite them, the men's room, the bathroom is over there. And I will reflect that someday I will be able to invite them to their own nirvana. Someday I will invite them to freedom. And I will never just boss them like this. I consider that the most exquisite thing. That's a tiny detail, right? A little bit of body language self-awareness, But it's infinite in its impact over an infinite set of consequences, right? You get it? Like, and a final word. When I wrote this one book that I personally like called Infinite Life, my editor hated the title. And I wanted a picture of the Buddha Infinite Life, which is a particular name of a particular Buddha. Amitayo means infinite life. I wanted a picture of that Buddha on the cover. And they said, no, we're not going to have a Buddha on the cover. We're going to make this really popular. So we don't want a Buddha. And also, you don't want that infinite life. It sounds weird. And then they said, and then they argue with me. And then I discovered in the contract they get to pick the title, the publisher.
The cover.
But I kept fighting.
They get to pick the cover.
What?
The cover they get to pick.
Yeah, and the title.
And the title.
Ultimately.
Oof.
If you really go, push come to shove. But they'll discuss it with you because they don't want you to not market it for them. Anyway, so the final threat, the final sort of like argument they had was, oh, come on, Bob. You don't want to go around promising people infinite life, do you? And I said, no, of course not, I said. I want to go around threatening them with infinite life. Did you ever see that movie, Death Becomes Her, it's called, I think? about these people who couldn't die and then they wanted to because they were all twisted around by auto accidents and things. Remember that movie? Goldie Hawn was in it, and all kind of people. So the point is, if you're here, we're all here. Like right now, here we are in Menla, all of us together. We have the doc here, Dr. Who, Dr. Mark. And we have, he doesn't want to be Mark so much anymore. He likes to be Dr. Who. But you don't watch Doctor Who, I bet.
I don't know Doctor Who.
Oh, I know all these people. They don't watch TV.
You do, you know.
Doctor Who, I don't know if it's on Netflix, but it's so far out, some of the Doctor Who, really it is. And now I lost track of what I was saying.
We're all here together at Menla.
Oh, yeah, so we feel, then it's Sunday, lunch, and then pack up your, unpack your pillowcase and put it on the floor, and then you go and you're back on Highway 28 and throughway and the whole thing. And then, okay, great, good luck. But we're going to be here, we're going to be back together forever, all of us. Every single one. One life or another. Somewhere or another. Next lifetime, you're going to be teaching the seminar. And we're going to be trying to figure it out. You're going to be the doctor, and we're going to try to figure it out. So we'll never stop. So therefore, what is the optimal way to relate to each other? Everybody's in love with everybody else. Not meaning that somehow they're going to molest and bother each other. It means that everybody is going to care about the happiness of everybody else. And in a way, your own concern will be sort of less important to you because there's so many other people you're concerned with. And actually, although that's the wonderful paradox, that's the wonderful cognitive dissonance, the more you want everyone else to be happy, the more naturally you'll be happy. The more you want yourself to be, this is Shantideva's unmatched, and the Dalai Lama has that lineage, unmatched teaching. And the more you want yourself to be happy, what happens? You're dissatisfied with how far you've gotten. So by thinking about, well, what's in it for me? How good is this for me? How good was it? As you're puffing away there on the edge of the bed. Not that good. Could have been better. Buy a different drug, do something, then you want something else, get a different partner, whatever. It's not that good. So by focusing on your own happiness, you're just always dissatisfied. Forgetting about your own happiness because you so much want everybody else to be, then hey, you're kind of like, whoops, I got chewed up because I didn't notice. Then I notice, oh no, what am I wasting my time? What happened? That Shantideva thing is really, it's just awesome actually. And I think all the great rabbis, like Jesus, he was just a great rabbi. Those people in Texas should have to figure that out one day. He was the rabbi. He wasn't even really quite white. There was a forensic guy in Western England, who helps find murderers from skeletons, and he builds up from the skull, he builds up what they must have looked like. And Jesus looks like a Pakistani taxi driver. He does. The way he made it up, Palestine that time, blah, blah, blah. So, olive skin, So what's with this silly thing that they have down in Texas? Well, I know the Baptist Republicans, Jeff Sessions. They're not white anyway, they're blotchy pink. So that's the thing. No escape. Therefore, make it good, make it great, right? Doesn't that become, so that's the reason for emptiness. The emptiness is the solvent, the lubrication that sort of makes you able to face the idea of being stuck forever with everyone and having to make it the best. Everyone wants everyone else to be happy. It's the opposite. The samsara is everybody wants something from everybody else and not getting enough. So therefore everyone's dissatisfied, right? And afraid someone else is going to come and take their things, and that's like that. And if you think of embodiments, the embodiment of a predator, the embodiment of all kind of crocodiles and things are all armored, the boundary, that armoring, the scales, the fangs, the whole thing. Human is a soft skin thing with crappy little weak fingernails and tiny little teeth. And, you know, they're munching some vegetable, and they'll eat a piece of meat if they find it somewhere running after they jump down out of the tree. But the omnivores, but they're feeble people, and they need to interact with each other, and their power comes from their interaction. And the militarist societies that pretend they're a bunch of mighty hunters, it's a bunch of BS. They were hiding in a cave with that tiger growling outside. Mark, what should we do? And then Arlene said, hey guys, here's a little stick I use for cooking. Make a big one and go out there and cut up to that tiger. Oh, thanks, dear. You go first. You first. I'll follow you. That's the mighty hunter. But then we figure out all these horrible things, and we can nuke the whole universe with hatred.
I hope you can hear me.
Yes. Sorry?
If we're all stuck here together and our intention...
We're all stuck here together?
Yeah, and our intention is to love and be kind to each
Exactly.
other, right? Make the best of it.
Yeah.
How do you suggest we do that in the current political environment where there's so much hate and anger? Like, how do you love the people who hate?
Well, how can the politics and the whole thing have to be fulfilled with hate, you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, if you watch them on TV, you realize it's very hard for them. They're having a really hard time. They put on all kind of weird totems, you know, and the animal-looking hats, and try to look like Predator, and they have guns, and they're all sweating, and they're behaving like they wouldn't behave with grandma. And they're like trying to pump themselves up to go out and be mean and do crazy things, because they have, you know, Wilhelm Reich called it, they have the emotional plague. They've been conditioned not to feel anything. And so therefore they feel very bereft and isolated and psychotic. And so they somehow, the only way they can contact is go and do some violence. And then they harm someone and they wriggle, and then they feel a pulse of life or something. So they become sadistic and so on. But they're struggling to do it. Look at the Nazi in chief, Goldilocks there. Look at him. You think he looks cheery? What? Where's the general? Bannon? Oh, he's giving a hug to that like collapsed-looking character like Bannon. It's hard for them to be nasty. Human beings make a big effort. They go to military training and they do all this stuff. They have the emotional plague. Read Wilhelm Reich. They can't feel. They're upset. They're struggling to be vicious. They're not naturally vicious. That's the whole point. And how come it's so? Well, I think it's a great sign, actually, that we're seeing it all out. And now it's all, in the old days, like 200 years ago, some czar and some king and some aristocrat or something with their private slaves and armies and serfs and peasants, whipping them on, and a whole hierarchy of people, one people whipping another, you know, the whole authoritarian cascade. And they'd be driving out the cannon fodder out there to slaughter each other, while they sat back feeling like actually subconsciously deeply distressed and frustrated and, you know, and all uptight, you know, totally uptight. You know, the kings, the French kings, do you know what they had to eat? Louis XIV? Instead of a nice duck confit with hot sauce and a plum and some like nice veggies around it and swimming in a good sauce, you know, all steaming hot, slurping it down carnivorously. Instead of that, they had duck meat, all like 40 ducks, all pasted together with lard in a giant swan with a palace and a castle and lard white trees and the meat. And it would be brought out in a big platters with sculpture. And then they would have to eat this cold, greasy, weird food. And then they had gout, and they'd have to wash it down with this. And then people were pissing in the street and crapping there and throwing it in the street in a little sluice in the middle of the street, so they got some perfumes. They are having a miserable time. And the English, why did they conquer the world and waste all the people in Africa and India? Because they had Yorkshire pudding was like shoe leather. with some boiled, overboiled, horrible, like elk meat, like, yeah, let me out of this island. And go find some mangoes and cook some spicy thing with some curry. It's misery. So how come it's so awful? But you see, they would all do that in hiding in their palace. And we'd be down there at some level of the slave hierarchy, terrified for our lives, and abusing somebody else underneath us. And then the occasional weirdo who wanted to meditate and said, I'm God, after all, felt inside, oh, that's Satan in there. We get burned at the stake. Down the hierarchy, they burn that person at the stake. The old lady out in the suburb who knew how to cure the common cold with some herb, she gets burned at the stake as a witch. But hundreds of thousands of them. They're so freaked out. But now, and no one would really see it, you see, so they would carry on with it. But now we see them on television. You know, justice, law and order, we're gonna lock everybody up. I liked them Ku Klux Klan boys until I heard they smoke pot. What? We see this complete caricature of human beings. So we won't tolerate it for that long. They can keep brainwashing us, and Breitbart can get a few crazed people to watch Breitbart rather than watching Doctor Who or the Starship Enterprise. That's a liberal conspiracy, that Starship Enterprise. Those guys with the weird ears, that's the wrong race. We're going to shoot them. Vulcan, we will shoot them. We sold them Vulcan. We need to get them. Come on, you know. Maybe Obama was a Vulcan. So, but now they're out in the open. And they're all there. Everyone can see them. And so none of them, from China to the US or anywhere, they're not doing the will of the people. They are not spending the money on what the people want. The people don't want to kill their neighbors. They don't want a huge defense budget. They want day school. They want medicine. They want nice roads. They want infrastructure. They want solar panels. They don't want these idiots. And now we can see them all the time on the TV. So how dense do we have to be before more than 50% of us vote? And before white women don't vote for Hillary because they didn't like her cheeks. Because she looked like a chipmunk who swallowed one acorn too many. And all those white women didn't vote for her. What's the matter with them? They voted for that creep to come and grab their ass. But he only does that because he can't get any satisfaction out of any one of them. Because he's all locked up in his dominator mode. Poor guy. Poor guy. You have to feel sorry for the guy. But because we can't afford to, because he's not jumping on us. Look at his wife. He's like, what, they dance together? Did you see that? I shouldn't digress in such things.
You're answering the question.
Is this okay? Is that an answer? So take heart. The key thing is, don't get mad. Stay humorous. See the thing, but resist happily, joyfully. Resist with humor. Resist by voting. If 75%, in Sweden, 95% of people vote. And they have basically better governments. Occasionally they get over-immigrated and they get a little bit of a right-wing. But mainly they have good governments. And the women are powerful there, you know, in Sweden. I have one. She didn't come today. So the point is, it's a good sign that the old military industrial type rulers are visible to us. And they're totally incompetent, and we're lucky. They're bombing the sad people in Iraq and Syria and everywhere where they've been actually killing people and dropping unnecessary bombs and doing things. That's really, really sad, and that's creating bad karma for us because we didn't vote them out. We didn't resist them enough. We kind of didn't bother because we thought we were brainwashed that it doesn't matter what we do. We're brainwashed that we don't have power. Every single person here has power. And we could vote. If we had 80% vote here, Jeff Sessions, he'd be in therapy. He would. He would not be trying to refill more prisons with more slaves to reinstate Jim Crow and slavery. He wouldn't be doing that. He wouldn't be able. He'd be totally voted out.
I think I'm losing my voice, but can you understand? Can you understand me?
Yeah,
Okay.
I hope so.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, I'm pretty sure the guy's name is Clyde Davis. He's a musician that actually has talked to like Ku Klux Klan members. There was a documentary that came out last year, like Accidental, something about like him actually befriending Ku Klux Klan members as a black man. And actually, I don't know how many years he's been doing this, but he actually had some Ku Klux Klan members become friends with him and exit the Ku Klux Klan. So it, you know, and after what recently happened in Charlottesville, it reminded me of when I found out about this man like 2 years ago. And I think that that's like something that we all can do is like, you know, whoever we consider enemies in our lives, to actually talk to them and find out like, okay, like where, what do we have in common?
Yes.
And try to start at that level,
Sure.
at least
That's
until
right.
the next election.
That's good. That's what Dalai Lama says. Dalai Lama's advice, I was not agreeing with him in the last interview I did with him for Rolling Stone. He said about ISIS, the thing to do is to talk to them, the ISIS people. And I said, what do you mean you can't talk to them? They'll shoot you before you can talk to them. He said, oh, you can arrange that. Just, you know, some of them you can find without guns and then talk to them. So that's true, of course, that's true. The only way to overcome the terrorism is not counter-terrorism. That'll never end. The only way to do it is to not be terrified and to try to deal with them. And that in Buddhist mythology, that's always the way they deal with the evil and the demons. They have a lot of stories like that. Buddha never destroys any demons. You know, these fierce deities you see back here, those come from India, and although this is a Tibetan painting, but they do like that. What they do is they immobilize the demon. They sit him down, and in the case of really fierce ones, they have to be kind of chained down for a while. And then they talk to them. And then endless, interminable weekend retreats. And like, you know, and massages and relax and like deal with the Reiki and inner armoring that may make them unable to feel their own inner streamings, which is why they are so violent and freaked out, because they're trying to break out of the prison of their own messed up neurology and coming down inherited, you know. And sure, you're absolutely right. That's Dalai Lama's advice. That's the ultimate thing, is to try to do that. And one by one, we can do that. But unfortunately, you know, sometimes they will kill us on our way to tea time conversation. They'll shoot us. And their point is, don't die with hatred for them. You know, die happily. And then we'll be reborn, we'll get them another life, another person will come. There's no way we won't get to Shangri-La. Shambhala, it's called Shambhala. We'll get there. We're getting there. This is Shakyamuni's planet. It's all going to be fine, because it is fine. Even those guys are fine. But they're just not having any fun. That's why they're out there trying to beat somebody up, or even just kill themselves. Because they just can't stand being in the cage of the way they've been wrongly conditioned, you know, and miseducated. So we can't hate them. We generally...
Well,
They're the worst. David Duke was my mother in a previous life.
Another thing you just
And the horrible thing is he'll be my mother again if I don't help him out in this life. But sometimes you have to restrain them, on the other hand, because then they won't listen and they'll shoot you before you can...
And one thing I always remind myself is, there's a quote somewhere in Facebook land, hurt people. And the only way to heal a hurt person is to, hurt people and heal people, I guess essentially is what I'm saying. So the only way to heal people is that if you're healed yourself. I don't know if you can hear me, sorry. So I always remind myself that whenever I get like triggered, and I feel like...
Have you ever read Shantideva's book, The Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life?
Mm-mm.
His chapter 6 is the hatred chapter. And in there is where it really deals with this topic in the really best possible way. It's the live thing. And the Dalai Lama is from a lineage, a live lineage, like Mark is Freud and Winnicott and so forth. He has this lineage from that Shantideva, and it comes before that from someone called Manjushri, who's a wisdom person, and Shakyamuni Buddha himself. And but you would read that, and what it is where you would be willing to let that hurtful killer person kill you. We would never be angry with them even if they killed you. But then there is a situation where, with that, even though you're willing to do that, then you no longer need to, you don't have any further development yourself. You're immune. You have no fear of death. You know that you go on always. You'll be better by being open-hearted. You'll have a better body, but you don't care. But you do care that you don't want them to kill you because that's really bad for them. So then you might forcefully resist them too, but not with hatred and not like, I'm going to kill you and get rid of you, because if you kill them and they die with hatred and anger for you because you killed them, then they'll be reborn and they'll come back and they'll want to kill you or someone like you again in the next life. So it's a whole different way of, a whole different level of interaction that one gets when one realizes infinite life. And that this we lose one, we win one, it's like that. But you really will win when the good guys really defeat the bad guys, because the good guys see the bad guy's point of view, and they see the bad guy's mistaken perception, and they feel compassion for that bad guy, and they want to help them. Sometimes helping them means being, fierce compassion, tough love. Not just let steamroll me, because although I'm able to do that, that would be really bad for the person. You see, so then it's complex, but in a way it's also simple, isn't it? Yeah. So study Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life. You'll really like that. Or there's another version called Way of the Bodhisattva. Not bad. There's many different translations. It's such a brilliant thing. Okay?
The documentary was called Accidental Courtesy.
What's that?
The documentary is called Accidental Courtesy.
Oh, I see.
I have a question to either one of you. I have a better understanding now of what emptiness means, but I'm curious if you could perhaps maybe expound on the correlation, if there is one, between emptiness and the 12-step notion of powerlessness. I'm just curious if there's a relationship between the two, and what your perspective might be on that.
Could you hear?
Which I think I could answer.
He said he has a better understanding of emptiness now, but he's wondering if one of us could talk about how the idea of emptiness relates to the AA notion of powerlessness.
Of powerlessness?
Of powerlessness, like I'm powerless over alcohol, or I'm powerless over my addictions, basically. I think the easiest way to understand it is that for an alcoholic, for instance, to admit that they're powerless over anything is to say that they are refuting the idea that they're all powerful. Okay, and all powerful is an equivalent to absolute. So someone admitting their vulnerability, admitting their powerlessness, admitting that they need help from a higher power or from a community, because we all need help from elsewhere. We can't do it, although we have to do it ourselves. That's the Buddha's last words. Where solve your own problem, basically. We have to do it ourselves, but we can only do it by admitting that we can't do it without the help of everybody else.
Yes, the theistic version in the 12-step is that when you recognize your powerlessness, although they don't use the language of emptiness, but when you recognize your powerlessness, it's you seek a higher power, you surrender your own notion of power coming out of your own intrinsic identity self. It obviously can't work. And then you allow a higher power to come through you, right? That's that whole thing they do with AA. But in the Buddhist version, it's love that comes through you. In other words, you're empty of this ego-centered power. Because emptiness lets you give in, surrender to the interrelatedness of reality. And your higher power comes from the need of all the others, the other beings, not from some God, but from the other beings. Do you follow me? They all need something. And that's in my patented formula for why the good guys can always beat the bad guys, is because the bad guys are only operating for themselves. They just they are working for number one, basically. They're isolated from others, so they're just working for themselves. There's lots of bad guys. The good guys are working for everybody. So even the bad guy, they want to help out the bad guy. So they have a much greater source of power, which is not that narrow, ego-centered type of power. It's the power of love, of wanting to fulfill the need and the wish of the many others. It's a much greater power. But it can only come through the emptiness surrender of my old feeble definition of like me, I'm the one, you know. As my old Mongolian used to say, decades before Neo was wondering who was he the one in the Matrix, he said everybody goes around secretly thinking to themselves, I'm the one. He said that. So naturally, when I saw the Matrix, I was freaking out. Remember the article, are you the one, Sonny? Have a cookie? You know, oh, she told me I wasn't the one. It's really brilliant. The Wachowskis are, the Wachowskis are, oh man, it's so great. So I think that's the thing. So since the psychoanalysis is not, although if one of your patients is theistic in their own worldview, and they find somehow God or Yahweh or something comes through them that helps them, I'm sure you acknowledge that work.
Jesus.
And
Jesus
if they're not,
okay with
then
me.
it's the relationships with the other people, which is more the Buddhist thing.
Right.
Right? That it's the source. So then you give up your own self-power idea to some extent, and then you let the need of the others through love, because of your love of them empowers you more greatly. That's that idea. Okay? That's a good question. Yes.
So that's from a place not of weakness,
Excuse
right?
me?
It's from a place not of weakness, more of strength then, right? When this powerlessness.
Yeah, well, in a way, it's that's
Realistic.
the wonderful thing, like Dark Night of the Soul, this sort of thing, San Juan de la Cruz. Before you feel the union with the divine, Teresa de Avila, Juan de la Cruz, you have to go through the dark night of the soul. Dark night of the soul for them means where you kind of give up. You realize you yourself, you can't manage. And in the whole thing about emptiness, that kind of, when people say, I realized emptiness, in a way, that was their last defense against realizing emptiness. Because when you realize emptiness, the realizer is just as empty as the thing realized. So it has you don't have it. And what it is an infinite field of relationality. Because emptiness is also empty. There's the emptiness of emptiness. Because the one-way emptiness is not a bomb, is if you make it into the absolute. And you think, and then that's that runaway thing, to go off into the psychotic world of you all alone in the universe. Because nobody else is there to bug you, because they don't exist. And the holistic misunderstanding of emptiness. So you do find, you surrender. You let yourself go down through, you do surrender. So you do embrace weakness. And then what's lucky is you discover through that surrender of the little ego power is this vast infinite power of all being. And actually in that light, the female is more advanced than the male among the human different embodiments. I hate to say this, but it's really true. And that's why a female is more empathetic and more naturally, tends toward empathy and so forth, and they actually bear the other being. Their belly becomes a condo without having been able to examine the occupant. They don't know where it came from. Total stranger. Oh, no, are you the rebirth of David Duke? Oh, no. And they don't even ask that question. And the male? Which male? Don't even step on my toe. What? I'm going to give up my calcium, my space in my stomach? Give me a break. So So that weakness leads to the greater strength. It's like martial arts, Aikido. You know, you just move out of the way, and their own violence tangles them up, and they collapse. My wife met the national treasure of Japan, who was the founder of Aikido. She and Tim met him, actually. I wasn't there. Jealous me. And he was asked by the professor that she was with, like, what was his secret after he had demonstrated a whole bunch of big guys jumped on him, and they all ended up falling down around him, and he was the little guy. And then he said, the secret is, well, there's no secret. He said, they're all like my brothers. He said, all beings are my brothers and sisters. He said, everybody's my brother and sister. So I just don't get in their way. And, you know, I want them to get what they want. The professor was very frustrated. It didn't sound like he had a gimmick. You know, it's like, everybody's my brother and sister, the little guy said. So that's the infinite strength of ego weakness. In a way, it's resilience of the ego. In other words, it's able to, you know, that's a strong ego. It's the resilient one. I think, say, Winnicott, these guys, they know that. Maybe Freud thought maybe we had to have a stronger.
I don't think he really thought so. No, okay. He called the ego a necessary. He called it a necessary fiction.
Right. The one difference, though, the only difference is that there's no infinite unconscious. The task of the human life is to become fully conscious of absolutely everything. Everything about one's own neuroscience, even which neuron is hopping where. That's the clear height of the void now. So the unenlightened has a huge unconscious. Tip of the iceberg thing works. The Daniel Kahneman type thing, oh, we're all helpless. But Buddhist psychology is not like that. That's where you start, but then you because of samadhi power and vipassana power, you get to understand your own unconscious completely. That's the task. Why? Because like in a dream, right, your unconscious produces things that surprise you and drive you in place. You have nightmares or pleasure things that you didn't expect. So after death, it's like a dream thing. And if you're being driven by unconscious impulse, you don't know where you're going to go. So people who are afraid of their own unconscious are the ones who are really afraid of death. Because they all sense subliminally that there is going to be continuity, because that's where everything in nature is continuity. There's no non-continuity in nature. Okay? Another question. Question, Mike? Oh, you had a question. Yeah, you got to hold that mic.
Well, it would be going back to that previous conversation about the anger.
Yeah?
Well, I feel like you answered it, but I can't get my head around it, and I can't get rid of the anger that I feel towards those people. Is there ever any justifiable...
Yes, of course. It just depends on how you define anger. You see, forcefulness. If you define anger as a kind of heat energy that gives you a kind of forcefulness, but you're in charge of it. You can either do or not do, you can express it. Then that can be useful. It's very tricky to manage because it wants to take over. Because what happens, Shantideva has the beautiful analysis. What happens is, the things that make you angry are a buildup of frustration. Frustration comes from something that you think is not correct, that is happening, is not being prevented, and you get frustrated. Or something that should be happening is being blocked, and you get frustrated. Then the frustration builds, and then anger comes to you in the form of your own voice. Like, what is this crap? I'm going to put a stop to that. And it says you're feeling too weak to do anything about it, but once you line up with me, you're going to be a powerhouse. But that's a trick. That's what an addict gets. You drink a bottle of vodka, then you'll get them. You take the cocaine, then you'll do it. It tells you that, and then actually you have adrenal responses and everything, and you collapse. And also when you're very clumsy how you behave. And they have studies, when you really lose your temper, 85% of your judgment disappears. And you misjudge the situation, and you do the wrong thing. And it makes it worse, almost usually. So, where anger, in the ancient Western moralists and in the Buddhist ones, anger is the one that is defined as that which takes you over. Where you are your body and mind are the tool of this forceful heat that then just drags you. and you just flail there. You know, you break things you value, you hurt people you love, you destroy, you kill yourself even. People will, they're angry enough, that kind of anger. And that is always no good. And that is that's like an addiction. It seems to make you strong, but actually destroys you. Okay? Now, if you understand that and you don't let yourself be carried away like that, and then you based on seeing the situation, there's two things that he says. The most important thing is maintain good cheer, which means when you see it starting to go wrong, you intervene forcefully before you lost it. And you're forceful while still humorous, while still out of cheerfulness and joyfulness. And then you're much more effective. Okay? And you get a little strength and heat like that. That's the first thing. I call that creative rudeness. You know, the idiot is about to tell you a bunch of nonsense and vote for Trump, etc., or whatever, or be like, let's bomb Korea or whatever. Some idiot is about to do that, and you know that they're going there in the first sentence, but you're a woman in America, so you've been socialized to be polite and listen. And then by the end of the paragraph of the moron, you're really pissed off, and you'll say some rude, really bad thing. So instead, you interrupt while you make a joke. Oh, yeah, oh, great, Dr. Strangelove, sure, you're going to ride those missiles down into Pyongyang, are you? Or something like that. And then they're like, oh, you interrupted me, they get all woofed out. But actually, they feel that you're still cool, so they can't get that freaked out. They might march off, but then you're spared having to list the rest of the paragraph. You spared the frustration buildup. So that's one of the things. And then finally, sometimes you really can't do anything about it. He has this great verse. He says, why get furious about something if you can do something about it? Just do it. And if you can't do anything about it, why get furious about it on top of that? Then that just eats at you. Actually, in some cases, you can't do anything. Whatever it is, you remain cheerful. You know? Why did the British conquer the planet as opposed to the French? Because the British stopped for a spot of tea and the Cheerio. And the French are waiting for the evening wine, and they get more like romantic and pissed off. So the British won that one. Both are barbarians, but the British won out that time. Okay? Because of cheerfulness. You're much stronger when you're cheerful. And so it depends on how you define the anger. Right? Is that okay?
It's a new one.
It's a new one?
Yeah.
It is?
Yeah, that's a new one.
That's a new one.
I haven't heard that one before.
Hello? Okay. I want to see, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
So when talking about anxiety and depression and addiction, it seems to me that it doesn't really just exist in a vacuum, that it can go on through generations. And so I was wondering if you could give any insight, maybe through Buddhism.
I'm losing it, but it's okay.
I'll tell you.
As to how to deal with that. Because I understand sort of being open and connected and being compassionate, but it can also be very overwhelming when you think of your own family history or, so I guess that's my question.
She's saying in talking about anxiety and depression and even addiction, it doesn't always exist solely in one generation, in one individual in one generation, that it actually stretches back several generations.
Yeah, it could be.
And that can be that can feel like an overwhelming pressure or an overwhelming responsibility. Is there anything in Buddhism to help with either healing backwards, I think is the implication, or else it not being overburdened by that load that one might be carrying. Is that fair? Yeah.
Did you want me to try that?
I think maybe we should both try it.
Okay, you go first.
I think the first answer is like what they tell doctors when they're being trained. You know, like when someone's having a heart attack, they say take your own pulse first. So you before you can do anything for anybody else, you have to be in a reasonable state of mind yourself. So if the generations have tumbled down to you and you're holding all of the distress, the first thing you actually can do is do something about yourself. So even if your already developed compassionate impulse is to try to save your mother or your grandmother or your father or his father or whatever, the impulse is generous, but the wiser course of action is to first stabilize yourself. Yes. And there can be a kind of fantasy of being able to go backwards and make everything better for people who have already suffered and are already well into their lives. There can even be a fantasy of going backwards into one's own childhood and reclaiming the affection or the attention or the acknowledgement that one never had. And I see a lot of people still battling it out with their 80-year-old parents, you know, trying to get them to see them as a real person, which they never did. And one of the things that I sometimes read that I brought along talks about that impulse being the most violent kind of nostalgia that we have, because there's still so much anger wrapped up in trying to make it right. So that doesn't mean that there isn't stuff to do for people who have, it's like in Sharon's story for her father and you know, living out his life in a mental hospital and so on. It was important for her to go back and help him get set up in a living situation that he could tolerate, but she could never make him, you know, fully functional or fully better. So similarly with a loved one who is alcoholic or you know, has a drug addiction, you know, the first thing you learn when you go to Al-Anon is that it's, you know, you can't stop that for anybody. You know, that you have to take care of yourself, and in taking care of yourself, sometimes you inspire that person that you care about. I think that's how I would try to talk about it.
That's wonderful. I completely agree with that. I think what I might add to that is the beauty of Buddha the scientist, Buddha the Darwin, with his beautiful theory of karma, which is a biological theory. It is not a mystical woo-woo thing. It's a biological theory. And the thing about as a biological theory is that different people are born in some lineages, but that doesn't mean that they were in that lineage in a previous life. In other words, different people have been born in every different kind of lineage. So there's one more gene to be considered. There's the mother's and father's genes, you know, which ultimately people blame. You know, people blame the parents, because they only have the one life, so then their childhood, and then there's some kind of psychoanalysis sense to blame the parents. And then there's other things about blame the genes, and then feel that somehow one is the heir of one's tribe, and they were suffered, and they were abused, and so forth, and one has to somehow deal with that, and or they were alcoholics, or whatever it was. But actually, we might not have been of the same lineage in the previous life. We might have been a McCoy, and now we're born as a Hatfield, and vice versa, in this biological lineage, in the Buddha's biological theory. There's no guarantee. And in fact, you might have taken rebirth. In America, the blacks have been badly enslaved and tortured and treated horribly for a long period of time. And so maybe a lot of people your age are bodhisattvas who decided they would be reborn in that lineage to try to help lift them up and make them equal and make them carry around those signs, you know. Those lives matter to these lunatics who want to continue with this nonsense. And similarly, some of those like white people might be people who were abused before, now they want to abuse somebody. And they're reborn. So in other words, it mixes the nations and the tribes. It makes it harder. That biological theory makes it harder, and why Asia therefore was more gentle actually as a whole, and therefore was conquerable by the Europeans, racist Europeans, because the Asian people had plenty of wars and stuff themselves, but over many, many hundreds of generations, they had been having this biological theory was operative, where if you're Chinese now, you might have been a Tibetan in a previous life. You might have been an Indian in a life before that. Within India, there's hundreds of nations. You might have been a Bengali or a Punjabi or whatever it is. There's hundreds of them. It's not one country. And then you're reborn in the other one. And in fact, one of the strategies of people who get killed in these tribal wars is to be reborn in the one that won, and then to get revenge that way. You know, it's a natural thing, if they're lucky enough to be reborn as a human at all, actually, in fact, depending on how aware of themselves they were and how open-hearted they are. So that's a really nice thing when people say, oh, you got to take care of your great-grandfather's like suffering. You are willing to try, but you don't have to. The amazing thing about the human being is totally deprogrammable and totally reprogrammable. And therefore, the human being who becomes aware of that is responsible to program themselves in an optimal way. And they can make immense evolutionary progress in any one life. They can. And they don't have to like follow. That's the whole thing about humans. They're totally weird, you know. That's why education, you know, like oppressive societies have a big brainwashing thing they want to do. Because they know that the human being can be conditioned to be resisting them, to be wide open, not to follow their traditional thing, to rebel against it. The human being is very individualistic compared to other animals. Human being is not hardwired. That's totally fake. Oh, we're all hardwired for survival. Well, then how come in World War I, they had those people out there marching up into machine gun nests? And I don't know if you know that, but the first 7 lines of the marchers who in World War I were only meant to absorb bullets. That was their job. And there was a guy behind them who was going to shoot them if they turned back, of their own tribe. And then the 8th one was able to jump into the trenches and struggle with the guys who ran out of bullets. And how come people were able to be persuaded to do that if human beings are programmed for survival? So we all know they can be totally reprogrammed on hatred, on pseudo-speciation. The Germans, or from the German side, the British, or the French, whoever it is, are subhuman, so they're just, they're horrible, we have to kill all of them. Whatever it is, it's all been going on for thousands of years amongst tribes. And any one person has the capability of completely changing that at any time. But they need to hear that it's possible. They have to have help to do it and so forth. And they have to have education. It's key. Education, therefore, is everything for the human being. And it's not just, you know, they always go in Buddhist translations, the 3 trainings. Everything is a training. Everybody translates, oh, training. I'm going to go get trained. No way, that's dogs and cats, and people get trained. Toilet training. Those words, shiksha, adishiksha, means higher education. Shiksha means to learn. It means education. And we don't believe that. All your Buddhists, they don't want to hear about that. I have a PhD, and I'm still miserable. And I'm still an idiot. So what could education do for me? Well, it was the wrong education, how about? It wasn't an education of your heart. It was an education of your sensitivity, of your humanness. No. Yeah, there was little humanities in there. The worst paid and the least important for the pre-meds and the pre-laws and the pre-Wall Street and the pre-militarists is the little humanities, and they go and read Dickens, you know, or Tolstoy or something, before getting out there and becoming master of the universe. So my point is, don't over-worry about it, you know, and don't accept. You know, I had an epiphany at Amherst College, where I taught, which is supposed to be the cream of the cream. Oh, it actually is better undergraduate education within the Western American education than the big research universities where the great professors send their graduate students to teach the undergrads too much. And there was this one, the three Buddhas that everyone had to study. Darwin, Marx, and Freud. Those are the 3 Buddhas of liberal education, okay? But what's the upshot of Darwin, Marx, and Freud? Darwin, your genes are driving you, and you're this helpless carrier of genes. Marx, your social position determines everything you think and say, and you just can't get out of that. And you're going to think according to where you're located in society. You know? You're brainwashed, right? And Freud, your unconscious is driving you, and it ends up like Kahneman. I'm so happy I read a little thing in the London Review of Books on Kahneman.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys did their initial studies for the Israeli military.
Mm-hmm.
They're all military. And Tevis and Kahneman, this whole thing about the new discovery that we're so helpless and we're just nudged by our unconscious to do everything we think we made, but reason is useless, so don't resist. You resistance is futile, you will become integrated in the Borg, and you will fight your enemies forever. That's a bunch of BS. So your liberal arts, great humanities student is told by science, Darwin, Marx, and Freud, social science, psychology, and biology, that they're helpless. There's nothing they can really do with themselves. So then, get out, go to Wall Street and make some money. Hell, what the hell? And then when you die, you'll be nothing if you've done the bad stuff. Who cares? You're nothing. So have some fun. Make some money. That's ridiculous. A human being has complete power to determine fate, and not only that, responsibility to do so. And every manipulator and dominator of every society knows that, and that's why they have myths and legends and fanatical beliefs that they enforce, and inquisitions of people who don't believe in it, and they torture them and fry them and do things, because the human being is completely capable of completely changing themselves. And actually, your good one can become a mass killer, and your bad one can become a saint. Human beings completely flexible. And therefore, anyone who begins to get a glimpse of that is responsible for educating themselves toward the good, because that's the purpose of human life. That's why we came into this weird thing, and we didn't reborn as a lion. Then we get out and we eat some wildebeest. We don't have to go to McDonald's. They just run by, all fresh. We jump on them. Actually, we have Mrs. Lion do it for us. if we're a male lion, we're too lazy to hunt. So that's a Buddhist view anyway. That's the Buddhist biology view. And there's one thing about all biology views and all scientific views, actually. All descriptions in Buddhist science, all descriptions of relative reality are only relative. They're not absolute dogmas. There is no such grand unified theory where the intellectual scientific ego is going to find some way to control everything. That's why Einstein freaked out when Niels Bohr and Heisenberg and those guys said, you get down to a certain level and there's no more objectivity. Your mind is engaged with it, you interfere with what you observe, observer and observed is all interwoven, and so you can't catch it. But we can do a lot of stuff on the surface with the probabilities, and we can maneuver, and we can improve things, ameliorate things, we can do a lot of great stuff. But we can't catch it with an ultimate theory. And then remember Einstein said God does not play dice, he rebelled against it, and then we have all this weird stuff like 11 dimensions and strings, blink, 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 and all this kind of thing. And they're all pretending they're going to find some way of controlling. The central supercomputer is going to know everything from the subatomic Higgs boson up. A bunch of nonsense. They're going to have to learn to surf the energy with their own mind. When their mind and the subjectivity is mingled with the objectivity, then that's another way of always accounting for the subjectivity and the bias, and really knowing by merging in an inexpressible way. That's where it's going to go. When the inner science complements and actually helps out the material science. So even that biological theory, although it has these great side effects, it's, as a relative theory, it's therefore, in a way, probably the most sophisticated biological theory that there is. And nowadays, certain philosophers of biology are calling for that. They're calling for bringing the mind back into the way life is formed as a kind of another element without going back to theism, and some kind of sort of just absolute control by some outside absolute. And this Thomas Nagel, Mind and Cosmos, I recommend that you read, that you will find that. And that's what karma theory already is. Mind shapes the form of life, along with the genes of parents. So there's 3 genes. And therefore you don't have to get carried away that you have to redeem. You have to redeem everybody's forefathers. We have to redeem all of the crimes and the things forever. But we're not saddled with it in this way, you know, because we've won this marvelous life form. Each one of you is like a miracle. Human being, it's unbelievable. Creature. Remember Carl Sagan in Cosmos? He would walk down the cosmic map and he would go billions and billions. He was just doing genes, but he would show what a miracle, like even the shoulder joint is, the elbow, you know, the fingers, you know. It's incredible human being, and the brain is unbelievable. And there's a lot more stuff inside the heart and navel. Amazing. And so that's, we reach this sort of thing, and it's actually better than we can be, and we have been divine. We can become divine, but that's not the point. Buddha is not specifically divine. He's said to be teacher of humans and gods. In Theravada, they even have that expression. Deva Manushyanam Shasta in Sanskrit, and it's similar in they just drop some of the consonant clusters in Pali, but same. So the human one is the one that is still vulnerable and still alive, but has a divine type of intelligence and can kind of figure out what it means and what it's for, and then can be a huge benefactor of other beings, the greatest possible benefactor of other beings. And that's the beginning of the path. The reason we waste so much time in our lives and worry about so many things is we don't take ourselves seriously enough. We don't really know what precious equipment we have as humans. And we assume we'll always be, or we'll be nothing later, so who cares? You know, this moment that we have as a human being, however many any of us have left, you know, is of infinite value to not just to us, to everyone. We can be so great and helpful to so many. And we can be harmful too to ourselves, but we have this amazing platform that we have, a human platform.
Do you want to take one more question before we close for the evening?
What's
one
that?
One more question before we close?
Yes, please. I'm sorry about my hearing. It's just the way it is.
So I have mixed feelings about asking this because I'm feeling kind of nervous, but I've been sort of turning this question or this problem over in my mind for a few years, and it's really come to the forefront this weekend. And when you're talking about the Buddhist goal, I guess, is understanding the unconscious completely. That I'm hoping that's true because it's, as a therapist and also personally, the the analysis terminable and interminable. I've sort of been on both sides of that, and Mark, your books have been very useful to me, but not all the way, you know. So I feel like I'm helping some patients some of the time, and I feel like I've gotten some help from therapy and analysis. But it does seem like old patterns from the past keep coming up. So I don't know.
I'll tell you.
You got it.
I'll tell you. Do you want to make a question out of that?
I didn't.
Analysis terminable and interminable.
Yeah. Do you think the old pattern should stop coming up?
Well, no. I guess I do understand that they will off and on for the rest of my life, but sometimes I feel like they're winning, kind of. So I've heard some things tonight about the mind being totally reprogrammable and the mind. I can't read my handwriting.
Yeah, reprogrammable, deprogrammable. Yeah.
She's saying she's a therapist.
Yes.
She's gotten a lot of help from therapy herself. Yes. She's helped some people some of the time.
Yes.
She got a little bit of help from my books, but not really enough.
Well, next time she should read it again.
No, she was encouraged by what you were. She was encouraged by what you were saying about it being possible to completely channel the energies of the unconscious for the greater good.
Yeah.
To completely know the unconscious.
Yeah.
But she finds in her own experience that the old patterns are still coming up and grabbing her,
sure.
and that's frustrating. And discouraging.
Yeah.
At times, at other times I feel great, like I feel improvement, I feel, I was telling some people I got very lost coming up here, and I was in tears. And then I see the sunset, and it was beautiful.
She got very lost coming up here. You weren't the only one who got lost.
You got lost coming up here?
Coming up here, and she was in tears, feeling like, why should she be getting lost?
She got lost on the road?
Yeah, on the road.
And you didn't have Google Maps. It talks to you and says, turn right, turn left, now go back. You can have a male voice or a female voice. You can, then you won't get lost. But we published the thing. But anyway, sorry you got lost. But you found it. Here you are. You found it. Here you are.
But I want you to cure me.
What you bring up, I want to say that this, emptiness, they have a big thing about don't teach everybody emptiness right away. Some people, it's like a wrong thing to overdo emptiness to some people. It's because why? But not so much, at least I argue, that doesn't so much apply here. It did in ancient cultures where people had a maybe kind of theistic sense of a divinity around, and they felt secure with that, and then emptiness they would misunderstand as nihilism, which is considered the worst possible worldview, because it renders everything you do meaningless and pointless, But in the West, everybody's already nihilistic, so it's not so much a danger. And emptiness can be, a lot of people misunderstood Buddhist emptiness, Buddhists, and still do, as nothingness. They wrongly do misunderstand that. But and also I never said channel the energies of the unconscious. I said understand the unconscious, make it conscious. Then if you completely understand all your drives and everything, can confront them, then you might have more energy at your disposal to do things that you shape to be useful and helpful to beings. But I don't mean you just let something come out from somewhere and then channel, because it'll sweep you away if you don't understand it.
Yeah. She understood that. She wasn't. That was more my translation.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking.
So it's a little bit esoteric, in other words, like the fierce deity and the whole thing, the erotic deity. That's a little.
But I think she's
Eros
asking.
and Thanatos is a little esoteric in Buddhism.
She's asking more how to work with the sense of. She's been trying really hard and making some progress, but still feeling discouraged at how much clinging there is. How many old patterns are still...
Well, you know what? You're helping people and you get burned out, and that's very difficult. Of course it is. That's the whole point. Maybe take a break. Get lost on another highway and go on a retreat or something and recover your own good cheer about everything. And naturally you get a little discouraged. But then, and also you think, all I can do is this life, because you have a picture in your mind that you're going to cease to exist when you die. That's our consensual reality. It's very hard not to have that idea. So then we had a lot of patients. Sometimes it helps. Sometimes they get worse, it seems. And we didn't do the right thing. Of course. But on the other hand, you're still at it. You haven't given up. You're just a little discouraged.
Well,
so you're here at Menla. So we're trying to tell you, don't be discouraged.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheer up.
Okay, thank you. So I'm trying to, and I'm trying to find the way there. Because sometimes, technically, sometimes it seems like talking about, having your unconscious become conscious. It's like rehearsing pain over and over again, in therapy and analysis. And so mindfulness seems like another way, another approach, another way out. So I'm just wondering from a technical, a therapy technique, how to improve on that, I guess, how to make that more.
Well, I think especially for the therapist, mindfulness, if you really explore it, like go on a retreat periodically and do it for a week or two, kind of thing. If you really let it become something that you're facile with, that it pulls you out of the identification with whatever the old patterns have been. It pulls you out of that in a liberating way, in a surprising way, by by getting you off of the content. You already know the content. You know it so well. And it pulls you in and then grabs your mind. But the strength of mind, or the flexibility of mind that comes with mindfulness, prevents that from happening. And so then you're more like skating on the surface of whatever those old patterns were. And that's when the energy of them starts to shift. So, and then that's useful to know, even if you can't, I mean, that's part of my advice not given thing. Even if you can't make that happen for your patients, that you know that that way of working with it it's in you also. You can do a little bit of that with them too.
If I could make a socio-historical point. Another reason you're discouraged is you are living in a society that the consensual reality of which is that the mind is not there. Nobody even has one. They're trying to replace you with some kind of chemical robot, some drug, that's going to take care of everything. And the insurance are not going to reimburse, et cetera. You get to see somebody twice and you're supposed to give them a drug made by some company that's making a lot of money and charging too much money for the drug. I consider every Dharma student and yoga student in the whole country should become a psychoanalyst. I did the wrong thing. We need an army of psychoanalysts to deal with people in this country. You need a lot more. There need to be more of you dealing with those people. And the whole idea that the mind doesn't exist is like, it's like, those factory workers whose grandparents made good living because they were union members in big auto factories. Now there's robots doing it. Well, they want to do shrinks, and they want you just to go out to pasture, which might be a break for you in a way. You can relax. You get lost on some highway and find a nice farm someplace. But they want to replace you with the drug, that they can make more money than they make with you. So it's like it's an uphill battle, and also you send your patient back out into a kind of nutty, priority misplaced society. So there's all this that you're dealing with, and the fact that you're still at it, and you help, I'm sure, many people, and you're cheerful and laughing about getting lost, and etc. And you're going to have a great sleep tonight and a great rest, and so are we, and that's the end. It's 9:15, and so please have a good sleep. And remember, when you fall asleep, you're not lying in a darkness and just having a break for not having to do anything. You're living in you're going to be lying. Your cells, your mind is going to be out of the way, and your worry and anxiety and discouragement is going to be out of the way, and your body's cells are going to be lying in a bed of infinite energy of clear light of the void. And it's really going to go pop, 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 and you're going to be energized to the hilt when you get up in the morning and do some yoga. Okay? Good night, everybody. Thank you, Mark. Mark has a little drive.
This video was brought to you in part through the generous support of the Tibet House US membership community and viewers like you. To learn more about the benefits of Tibet House membership, including special invites to trips around the world with Robert Thurman and geographic expeditions, please visit tibethouse.us.